Before we start, we're going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if I could have everyone stand up, put your hand over your left chest, your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. My name is Bruce Matari, and I am one of your 3 county commissioners. So thank you very much for coming out tonight. The purpose of this town hall is to inform you about what your county government does and some of its challenges. Tonight we're going to talk about crime and justice and the criminal justice system. Now, as an elected official, because this is your county government, I first of all want to thank you, and I think I speak for everyone up here, for entrusting us, the other elected officials and department heads, to run your county government. And so, thank you. Tonight, I hope to cover a number of different issues with respect to what each of these individuals, and I'll give you an introduction in a second, what they do in county government, what their challenges are, and how our criminal justice system works. Now, just out of curiosity, what percent of our $110 million budget do you think is allocated to the criminal justice system in Kootenai County? 2/3, 66%. So we have a $110 million budget this year, and $73 million of that money goes towards criminal justice services. Do you think your property taxes covers it? It does not. It only covers 59 million of the 73 million. So your property taxes alone do not cover what it costs Kootenai County to run the criminal justice system. So with that said, you're going to see, like I said, the issues that are facing county government. You're going to hear from each person what they do and their challenges, and then we're going to talk about the future and how county services, what affects them and what we can do to manage to that. So with that said, I'd like to do just a quick introduction to our all-star cast tonight. First up is Sheriff Robert Norris. Prosecuting Attorney Stanley Mortensen. Clerk Jennifer Locke. Court Services Director Callie Young. Juvenile Detention Director Eric Sheffield. Juvenile Probation Director Brian Alexander. And last but not least, Adult Misdemeanor Probation Keith Hutchinson. And thank you all for coming out tonight. So what I'd like to do real quick is just have each of you just talk about your experiences, your qualifications, and how you ended up here in Kootenai County government. We'll start with the sheriff.
Bob Norris, your sheriff. I have 30 years of law enforcement experience, 3 years as your sheriff here in Kootenai County. Not a surprise, I come from a small county south of Boise called Los Angeles. Came up here, became a part of the search and rescue team, and then there was a current sheriff who was retiring, and there were several of us that vied for it in 2020, and I had the honor to become your sheriff at that time. So certainly challenges that are occurring here with the sheriff's office is our jail and our patrol services, because we are starting to see a element that we didn't normally see here in Kootenai County. And we're also having problems with our psychological service calls for service, which we can't answer those in 10 or 15 minutes anymore. Fentanyl is by far the #1 problem facing, and substance abuse in general is by far our #1 issue facing each and every one of us here in Kootenai County. So that's kind of a snapshot. Stan Mortensen.
Our prosecuting attorney, Stanley Mortensen.
As mentioned, my name's Stanley Mortensen, and I'm your Kootenai County prosecuting attorney. I've 23 years of experience in the criminal justice system. I graduated from North Idaho College here in Coeur d'Alene, and then I went on to Lewis Clark State College here at the NIC campus, graduated from that school. And while going to school, I was a sheriff's deputy here at Kootenai County for nearly 8 years, both in the detention and in patrol. And after about 8 years at the sheriff's office, I decided I wanted to enhance my law enforcement career by going to law school. And so in 2008, I left the sheriff's office and went to law school. I got into the U of I, but I got a hefty scholarship to a school out in Virginia, and that beat in-state tuition here in Idaho. And so I moved my family to Virginia to go to law school. And then we kind of got stuck out east for a while. I was an assistant professor of criminal justice. I prosecuted out east. And then in January of 2014, 10 years ago, I came back to Kootenai County, and I've been prosecuting here ever since. 9 years as a deputy prosecutor, and the last year as the appointed prosecuting attorney. And so that's my 23 years of criminal justice experience. And I want nothing more than to stay here and serve the citizens of Kootenai County like I have for, like I said, about 23 years. This is where I want to be. This is where I'm raising my family. And when I make or help make the community safer, I'm making it safer for you and for my family, because I live here too. So thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Jennifer, Clerk Jennifer Locke.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Locke, and I have a bachelor's degree in economics, and I ran a small online business before I became chief deputy clerk here under Jim Brandon back in 2017. I served in that position for 6 years, and then in 2022, I ran for clerk, and I've been serving as your clerk for about a year. I think a lot of people think, hey, clerk does elections. That's all they do all day long. Yes, we do. We spend a lot of time doing that. We have about 4 employees there right now, and then we can expand to 300 to 400 poll workers, depending on the type of election. I'm also over the auditors division, recorders division, and county assistants. But my biggest department is district court. And Callie is our director here, and we have a manager, Acacia, that's there too. We have 75 employees there. And so we have really grown just to keep up with not only the magistrates we've gotten, but the caseloads that we have. We've grown from about 57 employees back in 2019, and now we're at 75 employees just to keep up with the loads, the process of the cases. Thank you.
Thank you. Callie?
Callie Young, Court Services Director. I started working for Kootenai County in 2011. I started at the bottom. I started in our records department and was just trying to get a feel for, okay, what about government do I love? What about it do I want to serve the public? And so I worked in that role for a couple years, and I thought, well, you know, this is pretty interesting stuff. I think I'm going to go for it and just kind of see where this goes. I moved into various roles in our criminal, helped out our civil department. I moved into a role in 2015 as a judge's secretary. I worked several years under that role and then moved into the manager position, and then just recently in June had the opportunity to interview and become director. So I would say over the last 13 years, I'm pretty vested. Like Jennifer said, we've grown quite exponentially from about 56, 57 clerks to 75 just in a short span. And we really are just covering the basics. And so we could potentially, for our amount of caseload, be considered a canyon. They have 25 more clerks than us. So we're putting in the overtime. Our clerks, I would say, are dedicated. They love this county, and we just want to do the best that we can for the public.
Thank you, Callie. Eric?
Good evening. Hi, my name is Eric Sheffield. I'm the director of the Juvenile Detention Facility. I've been with Kootenai County since 1991. I actually started working at the Public Safety Building. I worked in the control room over there, and at the time, I think the jail opened, if I'm correct, 1986. I started working there in 1991. At the time, juveniles were actually held over at the county jail in a vacated pod, J-pod, where the females were housed. So I kind of got my first little experience with what that was like. We had a director at the time that would come in and service those youth, and we had teachers. So in 1992, through what was called the Joint Powers, the Juvenile Detention Center, in cooperation with Bonner, Boundary, Shoshone, and Benewah County, built and helped funded the Juvenile Detention Center in 92. And that sounded like a pretty cool thing to do, go over there and work with juveniles. So I made the switch after about 4 or 5 years with the jail, went over to detention and just kind of worked my way up through the ranks, starting out as a juvenile detention counselor and becoming a supervisor and some other roles. And recently we had a director that retired and I was promoted to that position. So I'm very honored to be in that position. Juvenile detention is an interesting work environment. We're a 53-bed facility, and there's kind of an interesting phenomenon that's happened over the years. Our population, our juvenile population, kind of grew and grew and grew, and we expanded and added more rooms in the early 2000s, and now our population is shrinking. So I'm not exactly sure. Maybe we can have some of those conversations tonight. But, we're sitting at a facility about 18 residents right now. We're in the mid-2000s, we were, 48 residents. So that kind of give you an idea of how things look in juvenile detention right now. Anyway, happy to be here tonight and answer any questions the panel or you guys may have.
Thank you, Eric. Brian?
I'm Brian Alexander. I'm the Director of Juvenile Probation. Born and raised in Spokane my entire life. That's kind of where I started. Again, I started my career in the jail back in '06. I actually worked with Stan Mortensen. So helped out this community, has kind of been home to me since then, just kind of come over. From there, after 3.5 years, I went to Coeur d'Alene City, worked for the police department for just shy of 10 years, with my last 6 years being in juvenile crimes, working with children and juveniles in the system. Took about a year off, moved to Arizona to get away from the heat wave we've got going on right now. Surprisingly, I missed it. I got tired of sunshine and blue skies, so moved back and got my foot back in the juvenile world with juvenile probation. Was a probation officer for about a year before moving up to a supervisor. Did that for about a year before the director retired, and I've been in the director position for about a year and a half. And like the sheriff said, the fentanyl and the mental health, we're seeing that twofold in the kids. So even though our caseloads are down in the juvenile side, they do take a lot more effort on our end to work with the families and the community to get them help they need. It's no longer just, the kids stealing candy bars and, breaking windows. It's a different world for us right now. So definitely some challenges we're seeing and working on, and I hope we'll get into some of that as we go forward, but that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much. Keith?
Hello, Keith Hutchison. I'm the Director of Probation for Kootenai County. Kind of my career started, I moved in 1996. I moved out here. I actually moved from the Washington, D.C. area to Plummer, Idaho. I started in Benewah County. 1997, I moved up to Kootenai County. During the time of Kootenai, I worked as a deputy, detective, K-9, and then I moved on to a couple different departments where I became chief of police. During that period of time, I went overseas a couple times to contract work to work K-9s. 2017, I started with Kootenai County again, running their probation department. When we started with the probation department, we were right around 700 probationers that were in, 725. Now we're sitting at 1,260. So that tells you where we kind of gone in the last 6 years. We've added a couple, three officers on, but again, the numbers that keep climbing and climbing and climbing. When growth comes, problem comes. So it's just part of life and what it is. I moved here because of quality of life, and I'm trying to maintain it. I really appreciate your time, and thank you again.
Thank you, Keith. Just so everyone knows, I have all of our guests up here tonight sit in a specific order because we're going to talk about the juvenile system and then we're going to talk about the adult system. And so to my immediate left, your right, is Sheriff Norris, and that is usually the entry point in the criminal justice system. And so we're going to start off talking about juveniles. As you all can imagine, kids are our future. And what we do to invest in them has a big outcome when they become an adult. And so I want to ask you, Sheriff, just to talk about the different situations that you experience when it comes to encounters with juveniles, with your deputies, and the options that they have, and what ultimately ends up or leads them ending up into the criminal justice system. If you could talk a little bit about that.
Certainly. It certainly depends on what the juvenile is alleged to have committed. If it is a nonviolent petty theft from a market, we would like that deputy on the street to have some discretion to be able to say, to go to the parents and say, hey, do you know what's going on here with this situation? We've been seeing that he's hanging around people we really don't like him to hang around. We see that his grades are starting to fail. We see that he's supposed to be in it at night, but we check his room and he's not there. He's starting to hang around people we really don't want him to hang around. And so that is the start of an individual who becomes at risk. And so we like that discretion. In the event that it is a serious felony, then we will take that juvenile into custody. And we will process him at the juvenile detention center. And generally, they will stay there, depending on the offense. Sometimes the parent will cite the individual to a summons. But generally, they'll stay there if it's a violent offense until they see a judge. I do see a movement, and I certainly don't want to speak, but I do see more of a movement now to have the child offender remain with the parent. And maybe you can talk on that later, but it seems like there's a movement there within the judges to do that.
Now, is it just felonies, or do you bring juveniles in for misdemeanors?
Oh, yes. Yep, for both.
For both, okay. And so the deputies have a lot of discretion, at least on the misdemeanor side?
Depending on what it is. And they might just write a summons, write a citation for that juvenile to come to court at a later time instead of putting that juvenile through trauma. Because if it's a first-time offender, it can certainly be a little traumatic to be taken away from your home and what have you, so.
Sure, okay. All right, so then they go to juvenile detention. Now, Eric, are they there, is there like a bail process for them? Do they stay until they go over to Stan's office, the case at least? How does that work?
Interesting for juveniles, there is no bail process. Really, the detention hearing is their opportunity to get out of jail, if you will. The judge will take certain matters into account. Certainly, if we have parents that are willing to take their children back into the home, that would be their opportunity to get out of detention until their next hearing. So no bail generally for juvenile offenders.
Okay, so then the case will end up over in Stan's office, all right? So Stan, can you talk about when you get these cases, what you look at, some of the factors involved with your decision-making on how to prosecute and other factors like that?
Sure. I want to first say that there's generally two ways that a juvenile case will make its way to my office. One is if and when a juvenile is arrested, and that does happen. However, that's not the majority of the cases. Usually what happens in lieu of an arrest, my office will receive what's called a petition request, kind of like, a citation or a complaint request for adults. And what will happen is, backing up a little bit, if and when the juvenile is arrested, as mentioned, they will usually stay in custody until they see a judge at first appearances. And then from there, they're usually let out into the hands of their parents or to a legal guardian. But again, the majority of times when it's a petition request, what happens is my office gets involved early on in the case. Those cases are staffed by members of my office, the juvenile diversion, which, by the way, falls under my umbrella as the prosecutor, juvenile detention, juvenile probation, and sometimes even child mental health services. And so my office will staff the case and decide what's best on a case-by-case basis. Of course, if it's a more serious offense, we do have the option to prosecute a juvenile as if they were an adult. Unfortunately, that does happen from time to time. Of course, that's even more rare. But a lot of times, again, we staff them. And for most first-time offenders, we're doing everything possible to keep them out of the court system. And that's what our juvenile diversion office is for. If I'm not mistaken, back when juvenile diversion was started, it was one of the first, if not the first in the country, at least in this area, and it's been used as a model across the country as to how the programs like that are supposed to run. And so our juvenile diversion office is just a great office. It's exactly that. It diverts the juvenile away from the court system so that we can get the juvenile and or their family services to hopefully keep the child from reoffending, keep them out of court, off probation, and back into the home where they can rebuild or be a part of a good family structure so that they can, steer away from a lifetime of crime, hopefully.
Can you just explain a little bit about how that works? So they're not going before a judge, or they are going before a judge for diversion?
Usually not. Usually, a lot of times we can put them in diversion, and sometimes it's like a carrot and a stick sometimes, where we can say, hey, if you do A, B, and C, we'll dismiss the case, or we won't file charges. Because just because my office gets a petition request doesn't mean we have to file it.
Okay.
My office gets things sometimes that the courts never see.
So what is the deal with? Is it with the child? Is it with the parents? Both? Just kind of walk, like, who are you in contact with to divert a child away from the court system?
It is with the juvenile, but as everybody can imagine, they are juveniles. It does take family or parental involvement. And so the parents have to be involved if the child's going to succeed. At the end of the day, the child is the one being held accountable. But there's a lot of times where the parents, when they're involved really early in the case, the chances of success are higher. We've seen when the parents are less and less involved, juvenile diversion doesn't go so well for the juvenile sometimes.
So sometimes the parents are actually enablers.
I guess you could say that, yes.
Sometimes.
And a lot of kids go through juvenile diversion and they're success stories. We do see repeat offenders with the juveniles, and not all, but the majority, well over half, I would guess, of the repeat juvenile offenders, we've seen a correlation there, and they're usually from a home life that is kind of troubled in some way, shape, or form.
Okay. So let's say we have a situation where now this is a serious case, and it's going to go to the courts. So Clerk Locke, Callie, you want to talk a little bit about how the court system is working when it comes to these kinds of cases and how it affects what you do?
Sure. I think one of the biggest challenges we see is when a juvenile is arrested and placed at juvenile detention, we have 24 hours as the court to prepare a case, get all the documents ready for the judge to review, and have that court hearing within those 24-hour time periods. So you can imagine if we do have a pretty heavy weekend or whatever that might look like, those time constraints for having them in there in a timely fashion is one of our biggest challenges. Within those 24 hours, that also includes, getting the documents from law enforcement, getting documents from juvenile probation to have and be ready for that arraignment hearing. At that arraignment hearing, the judge will discuss and look at many different factors. Sometimes they will ask the parents to come up with a safety plan if there is a concern about that home life. And they will essentially issue a conditional release order that would have all the provisions, whether they are looking at juvenile diversion. That probation officer will work with them too, just kind of help make sure that they're monitoring things as well.
So crime doesn't take the weekends off, huh?
No, it does not.
Okay. So did you have something, Sheriff?
I just have a general statement that our best return on our investment, our best dividend is investing in at-risk youth. We see a better return in kids turning themselves around at a young age versus when they become 25, 30, 35 years of age. Generally, scientists have said that it takes about 3 weeks for somebody under the age of 24 to become afflicted with a substance abuse. 3 weeks of continued use you can become afflicted. Once you're 25 and over, takes 2 years. 2 years for daily use to become afflicted. So our best return, if you ever want to put a dollar somewhere, is at-risk kids is the best return in our investment. So that's all.
Thank you. Now, Callie, on the court system, you have 24 hours, right? And that is for the trial itself, or?
No, that is actually just for that juvenile detention hearing. So basically, at the point that they are taking into custody, we have 24 hours to get the case made, get the petition put in, get all the resources that we receive from law enforcement, the case created, so that way the judge has a clear idea of, what the facts of the case are, and so they can arraign them appropriately, and then figure out what next steps are. Typically, most judges are going to want to have, if possible, that at the detention hearing that the juvenile can be released to their parents. But again, sometimes there's those safety concerns. So if depending on what additional information is in those police reports or what is given to the courts, they might require those additional safety plans and resources put in place before the juvenile can return. Sometimes that isn't an option, and then those juveniles would stay in custody until more information is brought to light.
Okay, and that's the initial hearing, and then you have the actual court case down the road.
No, that is the court case.
That is, so
That is.
within 24 hours, you're
We're
deciding right then and there.
correct. So
Okay.
we have a very challenging turnaround as far as the timelines go.
So does that affect your office at all, Stan, on the prosecution side?
Of course it can. I mean, there's a lot that happens in a short period of time. And so if you don't get it right, there are consequences.
Okay, okay, well, that's new to me here, so I appreciate that, thank you. So they go through did you have
You're
something?
not done with me? No? Are you?
Oh,
are you-
no, we're going on to Eric now.
Okay.
Yeah, because they've been convicted, now they're going over to Eric's detention facility. And so I'd like you to talk a little bit about what it's like to take these kids in, what you do to help them continue to grow. I know I've gone through your tour of your facility. You teach the kids there, you have a teacher, you have as much of an environment that a kid could be in and hopefully, kind of thrive in that a little bit given the circumstances. So I just want you to talk about, what you do.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'll back up just a little bit. We'll go back to the situation on the street. There are a lot of decisions that the arresting officer has to make at that point. A misdemeanor or felony has been, committed, so that officer has to have, reasonable suspicion to move forward. And then we talked a little bit about the petition process. So they're either being arrested, and they're only being arrested and brought to detention typically if they're in imminent risk to themselves or the community. So those are the cases that are coming to detention typically. All right. So to get into detention, well, you need to be arrested, or you need to come in on some sort of a court order, a warrant, or in some cases a probation violation. But either way, a judge or an arresting officer is the reason why a juvenile ends up in detention. So then they come to us, and our intake process is probably similar to the jail's intake process, in that we have a lot of data entry to do, a lot of questions to ask the juvenile. We have to enter their charges into a database. We do fingerprints, we do photograph, things of that nature. A lot of screening gets done. Our staff do a preliminary screening with the youth for as an initial risk assessment. This risk assessment is later more scrutinized by our mental health clinician, who does another series of important mental health assessments to help them get connected to resources in the community. So we're really doing a lot. We got a lot of players in the game. So they go through the booking process. It takes about an hour to get through that process. At that time, we're making some assessments. We don't have a real stringent classification process. They're either going to go to what we call general population, which is still a room by themselves. We have only single occupancy rooms. Or they're going to go into what we call an observation room. If they're coming in and there are some serious risk factors, including, sadly, suicide ideation. We deal with that quite a bit in detention. The sheriff came over to visit last week, and we were talking about an incident that happened in our facility just about a month ago, a serious incident. Where KCSO responded and EMS responded, and thankfully everything is okay. But we have to determine, okay, where's this resident going to be housed? And then we simply take them to their room, and they're typically in their room for the first 24 hours. We give them an orientation booklet. They read about the rules. JDC is a high structure environment, lots of rules, lots of programming. And basically then we come on to the court process. The clock is ticking because they have 24 hours to get to their, in the juvenile world, we call it the detention hearing. And so that's either within 24 hours, unless their arrest, happened on a Friday night, then they're going to have to wait until Monday morning for that. So they'll spend a little additional time with us. So that's basically, the first 24 hours in detention.
Okay, and so what's the youngest child that's gone through there?
Well, at one time, I believe we had someone as young as 9 in detention temporarily, right? Now, I know that there's a bill going through the legislation right now to try to, limit that to 10 and over. Yeah. But that's very rare. Most of our kids are between 13 and 17.
And what about school? Talk about what you do for school.
Okay, yeah, thank you for asking. Coeur d'Alene School District teachers facilitate school in our facility. They're paid by the school district. So we have a special ed teacher and a K through 12 teacher. Kids don't skip a beat when they come to detention. There's a liaison who works with the parents, with the schools, picks up the schoolwork, brings it into detention, and they don't skip a beat. So, we capture credits. We've had juveniles graduate in detention. We've had them in past years achieve their GED in detention, so it's a real important program.
Yeah. And then you also focus on physical activity for the
Yes.
kids?
Yeah, so we have state standards. We're sort of under the purview of the Idaho Department of Juvenile Corrections in terms of standards. So they set all of our standards and we comply with those. And one of the standards is 1 hour of large muscle exercise every day. So we run a pretty serious PE program, and they run around the gym, push-ups, sit-ups, calisthenics, things like that. Sometimes staff get a little creative and make PE fun, but it is very organized.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I've been through the facility, and I can tell you I was very impressed with how clean it is and how much the staff cares about these young people. I think it makes a big difference, so thank you. So they exit your facility, and then I trust they go into Brian's care to a degree. Would that be correct? Can you talk a little bit about that? On probation?
Eventually you get to probation.
Yes.
There's usually quite a bit of lag from there. Just kind of clarify, the 24 hours is the detention hearing when they're arrested till when the judge sees them. We do have, should I say 8 magistrates? We have 9. We have 8 in a rotation right now. So each magistrate takes 1 week on where they work on juvenile cases over at the Juvenile Justice Center. So if everything goes right from the beginning of the paperwork petition process to where the juvenile goes to admit, deny, once they admit to whatever the allegation is, then they're sent to us first to do a social investigation. And then that's where our department meets with the family and the juvenile to get some background information, on the family, what resources in the community might be beneficial to the family moving forward, whether the juvenile has substance abuse issues, mental health issues, whether there's issues at home. So we put together that report for the judge. So they have a better understanding of that particular juvenile. So it's just not, cut and paste. They have good information on that family, how to best move forward. And then at that point, usually it's about a 7-month, if everything goes well, by the time that starts, the time they get dispositioned or, I guess, sentenced. It's disposition in the juvenile world, but sentenced in court, and then they get put on probation. So I guess at that point, that's where the judge comes up with, we make recommendations in that report, what we think would be beneficial to the juvenile and the family. Through probation, we do run 10 additional programs in the community for the juveniles to partake in.
And how much interaction do you have with the juveniles? How frequently are you in communication with them and monitoring them?
Right now, with the cases where we're at, we're probably in touch with each juvenile weekly and the parents.
Okay.
So we have weekly contact, whether that's at the home, whether that's at school, at a program.
And what kind of things are you looking for?
Well, the first thing, I guess the main component is when they get sentenced in court, the judge lists out what their probation conditions are, what they need to follow. Most common are don't break the law, follow house rules, pretty much the normal stuff the parents ask of their kids anyway. Now it's just on the court side, so we're kind of that extra sense of an extra parent, extra set of eyes and ears to kind of help. So primarily we're making sure that they're following that, but secondarily we want to make sure they're in school, they're passing school, getting them help with if they're struggling in school. We help get them with mentors, tutors.
How do you find these people?
Just community contacts through the
Yeah.
schools.
So you're always looking for volunteers?
Definitely looking for volunteers. Thank you for that. I don't know if anybody's following, but the Children's Village Assessment Center for juveniles just had the ribbon cutting last Thursday. And that's going to be a one-stop center for juveniles and families to go up and check in if they're looking to find substance abuse, mental health. There's a food closet up there. There's I believe, a clothing closet up there. And I know they're looking for volunteers. So if anybody's interested in volunteering their time up there, that would be a great help because that's going to be a great resource. Like the sheriff said, I mean, if we want to put our dollar anywhere, it's with the troubled kids, and that's going to be a one-stop shop that we're going to try to utilize for the community to go up there. And the biggest push for that is it's separate than this panel here. I mean, because a lot of families don't necessarily feel comfortable coming to the sheriff's office or probation because of that stigma. So it's just kind of that community, open community centers.
That's great. And then with respect to probation, is there a set timeline for probation, or is it something where you look at it and you say, I think this child is doing well, I recommend ending it?
Yeah, so in the initial social investigation, we'll make a recommendation of how long we think that juvenile should be on probation, if they should be on probation at all. Like Stan's office, they do have discretion. There's some kids that maybe came in not in that initial stage, so they actually got arrested, so they went through the court system, that maybe we think diversion is the appropriate way, so we can get them diverted that way. We can go anywhere from 6 months to a max of 3 years. 3 years is the max they can be put on juvenile probation for one case. And then, any time in there, if they're doing really well, generally about if they've served half that time, we'll push to get them released early.
Yeah. Do you see many success stories?
Many success stories.
You do?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's good. So you feel pretty comfortable that we're actually making progress
I do.
in changing young people's lives.
I do. Like I said, this is, I love working with the kids, and we don't get it that often, but when that kid comes back to you, when they're getting married and says, hey, thanks for that, being my advocate, when you were the only one doing that, when they didn't have that family support and you were there, I mean, that's what makes it worth it.
Yeah.
So
That's a big deal. That's a big deal.
that's
Thank you for
keeps
what
me
you
doing.
do.
So,
Thank you, because I know it's got to be touching to see some of the challenges that these kids have to go through, especially in the home environment. So, thank you. So with that kind of covers the juvenile side of this. Is there anything else on the juvenile side that we didn't cover that maybe should have been discussed? No? No? All right, forever speak now or forever hold your peace, right? Okay. We'll get some questions. So let's talk about the adult system. And this is one that we're a lot more familiar with. But again, the entry point is with the sheriff's office. And, I have one question for you, Brian.
That passed.
Yeah, I know. I should have spoken up. Do you ever send them back to detention? Is there ever a situation where you might say, you need to go back, you're not following the rules?
Yes. Easier answer is yes, but probation, we work on what's called graduated sanctions. So we always start small, if it's, say, maybe a kid that got caught with marijuana, a lot of times we'll have them do a research paper on how marijuana affects the brain in juveniles. If they have continued violations, we just kind of move up that ladder. Detention's a last resort.
Yeah.
For one, we don't want to put kids in detention if we don't have to. But two, there's nothing higher than that either. So, we try not to use it unless we have to.
You caught that well.
I thought you were going to ask, do you ever send them back to the manufacturer, the parents, and say, hey,
Oh,
that's what I
I
thought
think
you were going to
that's
ask.
the goal, is to send them back to the manufacturer, to avoid that. Eric, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing to that. So we're talking about sanctions and coming back to detention, yes, so they can commit serious enough violations to come to detention. But we have a great program that I just wanted to take a minute to talk about, just a moment. It's called the WILD program. It stands for Work in Lieu of Detention. And we work with probation to help facilitate this program. It's a community service program, and detention staff actually staff it, and they take youth from probation who have an opportunity to do community service instead of coming in and doing detention time. So they take the youth to places like, well, most recently they went to Lake City High School to clean up after the Fight for the Fish basketball game, because there's a lot of trash after an event like that. We have street cleanup sites in the community, adopt-a streets that we visit, among other places. So, we are actively working in the community with the youth, and they take pride in that work, and I think that's an excellent program. I just wanted to mention it.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So moving on to the adult side now. Can you talk a little bit, Sheriff, about what are the driving factors that get people to the point where they end up going into custody with you? Because you're the entry point.
Absolutely. Our jail, we are absolutely overcrowded. I should be at 361. I run a population of about 510. And we failed our last jail inspection. But the number one reason why we get visitors over to the Kootenai County Jail is substance abuse. They support their habit by stealing from their family members, their neighbors, and everybody else that they know or don't know. And that's how this cycle generally begins. Generally. The men and women of the sheriff's office are being worked quite a bit. We're working a lot of overtime. They're being stressed at work and their family life. During our peak season between May and September, we are a lot busier. Apparently something has to do with the cold and this white stuff that's on the ground. But we do swell generally with the type of activity and with our numbers generally during that peak season. If we could find a way to get a border wall, no, not the southern border, I'm talking about between Washington and Idaho. If we could find a way to put a border wall there, we'd probably be doing okay. But a lot of our high-profile events during that peak season do come from our residents or our visitors from Washington. And sometimes during that 4-day weekend, the bookings will be anywhere up to 50% of the bookings are from our visitors from Washington.
What percentage would you say are gang-related? Are we starting to see gang activity here?
We don't see the street crime that Spokane does. We have property crime, but the likelihood of you walking out to your car and somebody coming up to you and saying, hey, give me your purse or your wallet.
Thank you.
Give me your wallet, you're welcome. Give me your wallet. We don't have the street crime. Spokane has the street crime. We don't have that. Do we have property crime? Absolutely we do. Do I encourage everybody to lock your doors. I live in the rural area. I used to not lock my doors. You know what? I do now. I think it's just prudent. So we just don't have that street crime, but I've worked in communities that didn't have street crime before. And now it started with property crime. Burglaries, that's generally when the homeowner's not there. That's what we call a burglary, when you enter a structure with the intent to steal something. If you leave something out in your front yard, generally that's a theft, depending on the value and what have you. So I think we're lucky we don't have the street crime, the robberies, the aggravated assaults. Now, I will tell you, there is something that's on my radar that I'm starting to see more often, and I'm starting to see some 1% motorcycle gangs flying their colors. The deputies out in the field and the police officers in the community, we are starting to see that. I'm not talking about the motorcycle gangs that get together because they like riding motorcycles or they like to put together a community service cause. I'm talking about known motorcycle gangs who participate in criminal enterprises. Generally, when I see them flying their Vagos or Hells Angels, I see them more often. I'm starting to see them more often. So that is on my radar. Okay. But as far as a street gang, we don't see that, not like they do in Spokane. I am concerned about Spokane. They recently elected a mayor who ran on defunding law enforcement.
Yeah.
And it's not going to make our region certainly any safer.
Well, hopefully it incents them to commit their mayhem there, thinking they can get away with it, versus here with a properly funded criminal justice system.
I did send out a press release back there, and I did address it to Washington criminals and Kootenai County taxpayers, and I welcome the law-abiding Washington resident to come here during our summer season. But if you bring your criminal activity and you bring substance abuse and substances here that are illegal here, but not in Washington, we will certainly arrest you, and we will hope that you will prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. So.
Well, thank you. So can you tell us a little bit about what percentage you think of the crimes are driven from substance abuse?
So I've only done this for 33 years.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. Going on my 35th year of age, and I've done this for 33. But the number one reason that drives this is substance abuse. 100%. Fentanyl is our number one problem right here, right now. We are petitioning our state legislators to add fentanyl to be a substance that we can charge for a trafficking offense. As of right now, there's a loophole in the law, and the pills that we're getting here in Kootenai County, the 1,000, the 5,000, the 10,000 pills, we cannot charge a trafficking charge here in the state of Idaho right now.
And wasn't there a recent stop where you picked up several thousand pills?
Yes. It's commonplace. Most of our fentanyl can be traced from the southern border to Tri-Cities and to Spokane, and then right here in Kootenai County.
Yeah. And so they traffic through Kootenai County, either through I-90, or of course there's the 95 north-south corridor that gets utilized as well. And
Answer the question.
excuse me?
He didn't answer the question. You asked him what percentage of all crime was due to drugs.
Didn't I say 98%?
Yeah, like 90.
So 90.
something.
So I thought I said that with my 33 years of law enforcement, that I've only been doing this for that long, that 98% of people over there at the Kootenai County Bed and Breakfast, at the Kootenai County Jail, generally are there because of a substance abuse. Now, did they commit a burglary? Did they commit an assault? Yes, but generally the driver of the activity is generally substance abuse. 100%.
So until that changes with the individual, the likelihood of their criminal activity changing is pretty small.
Absolutely.
That's probably what's driving the property crimes too, because they're looking for money,
100%.
looking to steal stuff they can sell for money to buy drugs.
Right, which brings us to some crime statistics. We're doing pretty good on crime statistics, and we have this table right here on the back, and it's some recent crime statistics from 22 and 23. We're doing pretty good in all of the areas. Crime generally has taken a decrease. So that's a good thing. There is an area that's a little bit high, and it has to do with rape, and it has to do with a series of events that occurred at some high schools in Kootenai County that had to do with girls and boys who recently graduated who became adults, and then a series of events occurred, and we had a series of rapes that occurred based on a couple of different high schools and this group that was involved. So that was the increase where you see the 70%, if anybody picks this up in the back, that was the increase of the 70%, but everything else is low. And I have to tell you, I think that the city of Hayden helped quite a bit with this, because when I first took office, the city of Hayden had 3 deputies, which gave them about a 0.22 officers per 1,000. Every other incorporated city in Kootenai County has about 1.8 officers per 1,000. It's a nationally recognized standard. So if a city, like let's say Coeur d'Alene, it has 50,000 people, it has 100 officers, there are about 2 officers per 1,000 residents. So when I took office, it was 0.22 officers per 1,000 in the city of Hayden. And I have to give credit to their city council and to the voters, because they also agreed. And so we're moving in the right direction with the city of Hayden. That allows us to do more follow-up on crimes everywhere else, because as we know, the city of Hayden now has a big box store. They have a small water park, and they have several alcohol establishments. So we're moving in the right direction, and I credit the city of Hayden for investing in crime prevention and proactive law enforcement, because that allows us to concentrate other areas of the county.
Well, and that brings another issue, because a lot of people don't realize that when a city incorporates, they actually can levy for taxes, but a lot of times they don't levy for their own law enforcement. When you incorporate, you have your own growth model. The county's growth model is roughly 1 home per 5 acres. So it's not very dense, but the cities are the ones that are driving a lot of the growth and the density. But what they don't do is take into account law enforcement. And so they end up cost shifting that onto the county taxpayer. And so what ends up happening is, and you can correct me here, that we end up not properly funding our sheriff's office. And so it ends up becoming a reactive department and not a proactive department. And I guess you could talk a little bit about the differences between the two.
Absolutely. So when you're an incorporated city, you generally have different issues than a rural area. Generally, you have more concentration of probationers. Those are Keith's clients. So generally, they require a little more supervision, because generally you have different dynamics in a city environment than you do in a rural area. We have a big box store in the city of Hayden. Did you know that?
Big box store.
Yes. It's the abbreviations are Walmart.
Okay. I've heard of that one.
Yeah, the abbreviations are Walmart. I have to tell you, we invest a lot of time over there. It does require a lot of calls for service.
But it was the city that approved that big box
Correct.
retailer. So, and that really goes to they can determine their own growth model, but the law enforcement would oftentimes get dumped on the county. And so that's one of the challenges, is to make cities consider the cost of law enforcement, because that has to be incorporated in their growth model. Then that's how you get growth to be more tempered, if you will, because when the cities realize, hey, wait a second, if we expand and build all these homes, we're going to have to add 3, 4, 10 officers to patrol that, and there's a cost with that. And so right now, the county has been bearing a lot of that cost.
Yeah, so I would like to reiterate that I'm very, very happy with the city council and the residents by recognizing the need for more law enforcement in Hayden. And the reason why we're able to keep our crime down is because the best way to solve a criminal incident is a field investigation. If you have a complete field investigation by that deputy who responds on the scene, the odds of solving that event are tenfold. But if we're going from call to call to call to call to call to call to call, hey, you know what, ma'am, I know that you got burglarized today, but
Or yesterday.
let's get this here, and boom, I'm off to another call. But the city of Hayden is doing a great job. They are moving in the right direction, and I'm very happy with that. And I do believe that they deserve some credit because of our property crime numbers are down throughout the county.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So what other challenges do you have on the patrol side? Because, we did some analysis here with respect to pay. And a lot of people don't realize that because we were basically underfunding the salaries for our patrol officers, that the county, the county taxpayer, were paying for the recruiting and training, which came out to about $105,000, $106,000 to train these deputies, only for them to leave within 5 years. And we did an analysis that between 2010 and 2017, we had hired 62 deputies, and 33 had left before their 5th year. And a lot of them went to other departments in the area, and we calculated that it cost county taxpayers about $3.5 million in wasted money to recruit and train a deputy, only for Coeur d'Alene or Spokane to get the benefit of that trained deputy. And so what we did this past year was elevate their pay to 3% behind Coeur d'Alene. So 97% of Coeur d'Alene's pay is where our sheriff's office patrol deputies are today. And I'd like to think that it's made a little bit of a difference.
Oh, absolutely. We have stabilized. The first couple of years on this organization, from 21, 22, we were hemorrhaging. We were hemorrhaging in the jail, hemorrhaging in patrol, but we're stabilized, and we have light at the end of the tunnel.
So you're starting to get people applying for these jobs.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. So you bring the
And
person.
we even brought one back.
See, that's excellent. So now we're being a little more proactive in our law enforcement, and we're ramping up to get Stan's office to be a little busier. And so,
Stan told me he has enough money, give it to the sheriff. That's what he said earlier.
Oh,
Didn't
well.
you tell me that? Didn't you say that earlier?
we'll have to save that for a business meeting, okay? So you,
Oh, you know what? Yes. Yes, the question was, are we getting any lateral officers? Yes, we are getting lateral officers.
so we don't have to make that investment in the, roughly almost a year's worth of training for patrol?
We don't feel till about 5 years until they're fully.
5 years till they're
fully trained
yeah.
to go out there and work independently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's good. So you bring them in, you bring them into the jail, you process them.
And by the way, we run a small city over there. We know that, I'm not a 40-hour-a-week operation. I'm a 168-hour-a-week operation. The jail has its own food services, has its own medical, has its own psychological services, has its own laundry. It's a small city over there. And that's, we encompass a lot of the budget because the jail in itself is almost $20 million, but it's a 24/7 operation, as is patrol. Patrol is also a 24/7 operation. It's not a 40-hour-a-week job. It's a 168-hour-a-week job. And I can't send a one-person deputy to many calls for service, especially family disturbances anymore. So
So can you talk a little bit about, you bring somebody into custody, they're brought into the jail, they get processed. You don't have a 24-hour rule like in juvenile detention, typically, right?
Correct. We have a 48-hour review of probable cause, a probable cause declaration.
Okay. And then at what point does the case get handed over to Stan's office?
As long as that, and I'll let Stan, but as that judge believes that there is probable cause exist to hold and no bail has been posted for this individual, then we go over there and send them to Stan's office. And even the ones that post bail, they go to Stan's office.
So Stan, you want to talk a little bit about that? And you have quite a caseload.
We do. We I have some numbers. And just so you can kind of compare, last year in 2022, my office received about 6,700 cases, and we filed a little over 4,700 of them. And I'm sorry, that was 2022. I forgot it's 2024 already. So in 2022, we received 6,700 plus cases, and we filed on over 4,700 of them. And in 2023, we received 6,900, so that's 200 more from the previous year. And we filed about 150 less, 4,578 cases. So basically, what we're talking about here is my office handles upwards of 4,000 or 5,000 cases a year. And that's because my office prosecutes all misdemeanors that the state police or the sheriff's office charges, but my office also prosecutes all felonies, no matter who charges them. That includes Spirit Lake, it includes Rathdrum, includes Hayden, Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, the state, and Kootenai County.
So the entire county.
The entire county.
One of the things I noticed is that the juvenile numbers increased 27% between 2022 and 2023. You went from 651 to 827 as far as cases received. What would you attribute that to?
You know, I don't know that I can point to any one thing,
No.
honestly. I mean, it's a mixed bag. We have no control over the cases that come in. We can only semi-control what cases we file on. And
Sure.
We have to screen them on an individual basis. You know, when the sheriff's deputies and officers make charging decisions, they're making that decision on probable cause. That's basically the lowest, if not the next to lowest burden in our court system. In order to prove a case, we have to prove the case beyond all reasonable doubt. And sometimes there's a big difference between probable cause and proof beyond reasonable doubt. And so when my office gets a case and it's charged on a probable cause basis, we have to screen that case and decide if it's ready for trial, or if it needs more follow-up work, or if we just have to dismiss the case because we're not going to get to proof beyond reasonable doubt. And so that's the reason why there's a lot more cases coming into my office than we'll ever file.
Now, right now, are you roughly 20% vacant?
We're a little bit better than that. Just a few months ago, we were 20% vacant as far as my attorneys go. We were basically down 5 attorneys out of 25 criminal attorneys. My office has about 30 attorneys. 4 are civil attorneys. Then there's me, and then there's 24 criminal attorneys, and I handle a criminal caseload myself, even though I'm the appointed prosecutor, because you know, I just can't let my deputies suffer like that. And so I work cases, albeit a reduced caseload. But yeah, we, out of 24, 25 deputy prosecutors, we were short, understaffed by 5 prosecutors. We, of course, received a little bit of a pay bump a couple months ago. That helped. We were able to recruit one of our former deputy prosecutors back. And so now we have a new employee that started today that we don't have to train because we trained them already. And then we recruited a 13-year prosecutor from another county to come work for us because we're offering a little bit better wages than we used to. We have also extended 2 job offers that have been accepted. Unfortunately, one won't start till March and one won't start till August. But we are very selective in who we hire. The minimum qualification is to be an attorney. I'm going to tell you right now, there's a lot of good attorneys in this town, but not every attorney can be a prosecutor. So we're extremely selective on who we let work in this office. And sometimes we find these people because they were interns during law school and whatnot. And sometimes they have to wait and take the bar or transfer their license from one state to the next. And so sometimes we find the right person, but we have to wait for them to get here or to take the bar, to transfer their law license from one state to the next. And so what I'm trying to say is in the last 2 months, we've hired 2 deputy prosecutors, and over the next few months, we'll be hiring 2 more. They've just accepted the job on paper. They just haven't started yet.
And does the caseload, the excessive caseload, because of the shortage of staffing, does that affect at all how you prosecute criminals?
It can, unfortunately. You know, if I have 100 cases to divvy out amongst 25 attorneys, you know, that's 4 cases for every attorney. But if I only have 20 attorneys instead of 25, that means every attorney gets 5 cases instead of 4. And I know those are small numbers, but to show you how that works, when I was a deputy prosecutor, I had well over 90 cases on a regular basis. And you sort of drowned in your casework. Some attorneys only have 30, 40, 50 cases, but depending on the kinds of cases, that's a lot. You know, I handled a lot of the vehicular manslaughter cases and a lot of the drug cases, and when you get used to the same case over and over again, you get pretty proficient at it. Plus, you know, compared to a murder, drug cases don't require a lot of effort, but when you're prosecuting child predators, murderers, and people like that, you can't have 80, 90 cases.
Okay, so that's good to know. What other kind of challenges do you have with your office?
One of the challenges is the law is always changing. You know, the courts, the appellate courts, the Supreme Court, they're always deciding cases, and so we have to learn the new law or the changes in the law, and then we have to turn around and make sure our law enforcement counterparts understand the changes. So there's a lot of continuing education and training that's involved. You know, we're not completely 24 hours like the sheriff's office is, but a couple of my employees are always on call. We have 2 employees that are on call all week long, and we take turns doing that. In the middle of the night, when the police officers need advice or they want to get a warrant, we're the ones helping them draft the warrants. We're the ones waking up the judges and helping them get the warrants. And so, you know, on a Friday, Saturday night, it can happen Sunday through Thursday as well, but on a Friday, Saturday night, it's not uncommon for our phone to ring 3, 4, 5 times a night. You're just not getting any sleep because you're always getting woken up by the police officers. And so crime doesn't sleep.
So you take a serious criminal, a case here, and what are the things that you're looking at with a more serious crime? Are you looking to try to plea it down if that option is there, or do you want to prosecute and take it to a conviction?
It's a case-by-case basis. What we do is we accept the case, we screen it. And sometimes we can screen a case in 10, 15 minutes. Sometimes it takes a few hours. Just depends on the case. But we screen it. We look at the person's criminal history. We look at the police reports. If we have time, some of these people are in custody and they go to court in a matter of hours. If we have time, we'll look at the body camera, the dash camera. Sometimes we'll call the officer or the detectives to see what else there is for us. But we'll have to make a charging decision. And again, we charge based off probable cause. But again, we're looking forward to trial. So we will charge based on probable cause. But we know we need proof beyond reasonable doubt if we're going to secure a conviction. And so after we charge the case, we typically send a plea deal out. We typically send a plea deal out in most of our cases. And it's not always a plea deal because we think the case is weak and stuff like that. Sometimes we're sending out a plea deal that's basically, hey, plead guilty to everything, and we want you to go to prison. And so just because we extend a plea offer or a plea deal doesn't necessarily mean we're selling the farm. But there are times where we will charge a case and new information will come to light that basically makes it not as strong of a case as it used to. Or, you know, it is the same case we screened, but we have doubts about what the jury will do. You know, I've been doing this a long time. I've taken a lot of cases to trial and I've won the majority of them, but sometimes you lose a case that you think you should have won and you win the cases that you think maybe you might not have won. And so it's really unpredictable what the judge or the jury might do, but we have that experience. And so when we look at a new case, we can judge that new case based off of prior cases. And when we determine a case might not be or have a high likelihood of success at trial, we are forced to look at the case and maybe extend a plea offer that is, you know, maybe a reduction from one charge to the next. Or maybe it's not a reduction in charges, but it's, hey, we won't recommend 10 years in prison, we'll recommend 5 years in prison. Or we won't recommend prison at all, we'll agree to probation. And so plea deals are multifaceted. It can mean just about anything.
Now, you do something that's a little different than a lot of other prosecutors, because you have recommended sentences that you're trying to get for some of your cases, and then you also keep track of what the actual sentence was issued by the judge. You want to talk a little bit about that?
That's correct.
Can you talk about the one you released today?
Well, I have one that was released today, and I have another one for tomorrow. I'll give you a preview of that, and it has to do with fentanyl. But basically, I think what Bruce is getting at is here in Idaho, we do not have sentencing guidelines, okay? What that means is virtually every time we get a conviction and go to sentencing, the judge can do whatever they want, except exceed the maximum sentence. So if I prosecute somebody for possession of methamphetamine, it's a felony, it's punishable by up to 7 years in prison. Okay? If I determine that that person should go to prison for all 7 years, I'm going to make that pitch to the judge at sentencing. But that's just a recommendation. The judge does not have to listen to anything. Well, they have to listen. They don't have to follow it. And so the judge could say, I'm going to give you credit time served and release you no probation. Now, that's kind of extreme, but what I'm trying to say is a lot of times we come into court and we recommend prison, and the courts will put somebody on probation. That's because the judges don't have to follow our recommendation. It's all it is. It's a recommendation. So Idaho is not like the federal system, and it's not like a lot of states in the country. There are no sentencing guidelines. With the exception of first-degree murder and drug trafficking, our judges have almost complete discretion upon sentencing. And so what Bruce is saying is exactly right. All we do is make a recommended sentence. And of course, the defense attorney is going to make a recommended sentence as well. And as you can imagine, their recommended sentence is going to look a little bit different than the prosecutor's recommended sentence. The judge doesn't have to follow the defense attorney's recommended sentence either. So the judge is going to issue the sentence irrespective of what the prosecutor wants. And that's what I do in my press releases. I know there's a lot of you that don't like Facebook. I don't like it either, but unfortunately I'm on it. But I would challenge you to follow my office's Facebook page because, again, as Bruce mentioned, I do something that I think is a little unique. I will tell the people what the conviction was. Then I'll give you a couple sentences, maybe a paragraph, giving you some of the juicy details about the crime. And then I'll tell you what the maximum sentence is allowable under the law. Then I'll tell you what my office recommended. But then I'll tell you what the judge actually sentenced. Okay? And sometimes the judges sentence more severely than I'll recommend. Sometimes the judges won't sentence as severely as I'll recommend. But I believe that people should know what happens in court. You know, a lot of agencies around the state and around the country, they just publish what the judges do. I don't think you can accurately gauge that unless you compare it to what the prosecution recommends. And so that's what I want the people to know. Sometimes if you think my sentences or my recommendations are too weak or too light, I want to know. But I can promise you, if you look at my Facebook page, nearly all, if not all, my sentencing recommendations are going to be more severe than the judges are currently giving to some of our more violent and significant criminals in this county.
And I think that's what really stands out, is that we're talking about serious career-type criminals, right? Not first-time offenders where they may have made a mistake and they want to kind of, rehabilitate themselves.
Well, depending on the circumstances, sometimes first offenders do need to go to prison. But, prison's not for everybody. And whether I want prison or not everybody's going to go to prison. And even the people that do go to prison are eventually going to get out, most people. And so there is a big element of this geared towards rehabilitation. Whether somebody goes to prison or not, we all have an interest in that person not repeat offending.
Thank you. So what else did we not cover about, you're taking these cases into your office, and obviously you're going to be taking them to court.
Mm-hmm.
What else have we not covered at this point?
Well, if you remember the numbers I gave, we prosecute thousands of cases every year, but there's thousands of cases we don't prosecute. My office still has to be involved in those cases. We have to screen them. We have to send them back to the agencies for follow-up investigation. We'll get them back a second or third time sometimes, and we'll screen them again. And so even though we might not file in a case, my office is handling cases that'll never see the light of day in court for different reasons, and that keeps us extremely busy. And that with being on call, we're a very busy office.
And that's a good point, because a lot of people don't realize that the public defender's office, they may defend 100 cases, but Stan's office has seen 120 and decided not to prosecute 20 of them. And so those cases never really require a public defender. Is that correct?
That's true, and even if we do prosecute, sometimes there are cases the public defender's office won't get involved in, at least not right away. If we charge a case and we take it to a preliminary hearing, the defense attorney is going to be at the preliminary hearing, and they're going to be able to challenge the evidence and call their own witnesses. There are times where we'll submit a case to a grand jury, and at a grand jury, there's no defense attorney, there's no cross-examination of witnesses. And so we'll be prosecuting those cases early on, and those are cases that the public defender's office will either never get or won't get right away.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Any other issues that your office is contending with?
Again, it's just being transparent with the public. As the sheriff mentioned, we had a press release today. We had a gentleman from Florida shopping at Target, and instead what he was doing was he was taking his cell phone and snapping pictures up the skirts of young women. And unfortunately, the young woman he snapped a picture of was a 16-year-old girl. And fortunately, the Target employee saw this and reported it to law enforcement. Law enforcement investigated it, figured out who he was. We got an arrest warrant for him, found him on a traffic stop, and fortunately, he had his phone on him when he was arrested. So the law enforcement officer seized the phone, got a search warrant, searched the phone. Upon searching the phone, we found out that he took similar pictures of two 17-year-old girls at a grocery store in town. And so he did this to 3 young women in our community. Unfortunately, video voyeurism is a felony, but it's only a 5-year maximum felony. And so, of course, we went into court and recommended the full 5 years. And we asked the judge to not let this person be eligible for parole until they hit 3 years. In Idaho, we have what's called split sentencing. If you go to prison for 10 years, you're going to have that sentence split, whether it's 1 + 9 or 9 + 1 or however else you can get to 10. The first number is the minimum amount of time you have to do in prison before you're even eligible for parole. So a 5-year sentence could be a 1 + 4, or a 4 + 1, or a 3 + 2. So that's what we recommended, a 3 + 2. So it's a 5-year sentence with parole eligibility no sooner than 3 years. The judge gave the 5-year sentence, but the judge allowed that person to be eligible for parole after only 1.5 years. Okay?
Prior conviction?
He did have a prior conviction from another state for a misdemeanor offense similar to that. But I think the way that state disposed of that case, it didn't carry too much weight in court. And then we're doing a press release tomorrow. Traffic stop. The officers found 150 fentanyl pills. And I know that doesn't, well, I'm going to say that doesn't sound like a lot anymore because we are seeing thousands. But the officer saw a few pills in plain view, searched the car, found 150 pills, and a pound of meth. Okay? Now, the pound of meth, we could charge trafficking methamphetamine. Trafficking methamphetamine is punishable by up to life in prison. But again, even when a crime is punishable by life, the judge could put that person on probation. Fortunately, our legislature years ago, passed legislation outlining the trafficking of methamphetamine, which means if you have so much weight, it's trafficking. We don't even have to prove what they intended to do with it. The fact that they possessed it and it was so much weight means it's trafficking. What that means is there's a mandatory minimum sentence the judge has to follow even if the judge never gives life. The legislature has not done that yet with trafficking. With fentanyl. Thank you. And as bad as that sounds, there's actually some debate in the legislature right now about removing mandatory minimums off the other drugs like cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine. So we're sitting here trying to fight for trafficking and mandatory minimums on fentanyl, but there's a concerted effort down in Boise to get rid of trafficking for all the other drugs, which makes it less likely we'll get trafficking for fentanyl someday. And so my office received this case that we would have loved to have prosecuted trafficking fentanyl, but we don't have trafficking fentanyl. We got the most bang for our buck out of the trafficking meth. And this person did go to prison, again, not for as many years as we recommended, but you can read about that tomorrow in my press release.
Thank you, Stan. So you have the case and you're moving it on over to the court system. And I know you talked a little bit about the juvenile side, but what about on the adult side?
So I would think that the adult side is just as much involved. I know that Stan had kind of gone over the numbers of cases that come through their office, but at district court, we get all of the cases. So not just from the prosecutor's office, but we get Coeur d'Alene prosecutor, Hayden, and Post Falls. So I was just kind of preparing and looking at some different stats. And so in 2022, just our criminal cases alone, we processed 21,212 cases.
Wow.
So we see all the cases that are coming through for every single prosecuting agency. In 2023, we just ended at 22,742. Those are just criminal cases alone. That's not entailing the large number of civil cases that we see also come through.
So you're staying busy.
We are, just a little bit.
Yeah. And how many judges process these cases?
Right now, we have 9 magistrate judges. We have 4 district judges.
Okay. All right. And what are your challenges right now?
Right now, I think one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing is just keeping up with the caseloads and the workload. So we do have a staff of 75 clerks. However, each department has their own separate responsibilities and duties. And so right now, as we're seeing the influx in cases, what one clerk might do on a daily basis is now threefold. And so we have a lot more need for overtime. We're working through weekends. It used to just be a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Now we're working all weekend long as well. We have clerks that come in on, vacation time that was approved. I mean, our clerks are a very dedicated group of clerks, and we will get the job done, but we are seeing, especially during those COVID years, it was really tough for us. We saw a lot of just the burnout and just kind of recouping from that and, supporting our staff, letting them know that we're there for them and getting through those numbers and still serving justice.
And is there a real skill set for these clerks? Is it something you can just hire right off the street, or does it take time to actually get someone up to speed?
So it kind of depends on what position you move into. We will hire off the street, so to speak, but it definitely does make the job a little bit harder in that training phase. So usually we will have people come in. We like to have them cross-trained, so we will have them start in our records department. We'll have them move through criminal, civil. It's really hard to hire without prior knowledge or skills for our in-court positions. Those typically, just the minimum training for a magistrate clerk is up to a year. Really, it's anywhere from about 3 to 5 years.
And what happens if they make a mistake? Is there a consequence? Like if a law enforcement officer makes a mistake or the prosecutor makes a mistake?
There sure is, which is why we have a very good process in place for first check, second check, and then we have people check that work. But yeah, we have had instances where a warrant wasn't quashed timely. That person leaves the courthouse, they walk down, they meet law enforcement, they're picked up on that warrant. So, we do have those scenarios where we have to act quickly.
Yeah, okay. So they run through the court system, and then they're back at the sheriff's jail. And just real quickly, if you could just talk about some of your challenges at the jail, because I know you've had staffing issues, which the staffing issues have driven the inmate population limit issues that you faced.
Yeah, so we did fail our last jail inspection for capacity. All the other categories, we passed, but we did fail that because of our jail capacity and the amount of staff we have for those inmates. But it's creating a little, well, it's creating a lot of stress because for a short period of time, a little bit of overtime is okay for the staff. But for years on end, to have to work your normal shift plus 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a month, you have a degree of burnout. And so that's a factor. It's a lot more volatile. We're seeing more inmate on inmate fighting going on within the jail. We're seeing more of an organized structure within the inmates, what we call shot callers, or bosses within the dorms. So it's the character of the jail is starting to change to more of a serious, bigger city jail. We run the second largest jail and the second largest sheriff's office in the state of Idaho. Even though Canyon has a bigger population, we have obviously twice the square miles than they do. But we run a larger jail than Canyon does.
And so we are planning on completing the 2 pods that were shells that were constructed about 5 years ago. So I trust that's going to help some with the relief as far as the overcrowding a little bit?
Yes, and should improve conditions for the inmates, and it should improve with our staffing, and hopefully we can address those staffing issues, which we're moving in the right direction for that also.
And at what point during your tenure, what percentage vacancy did you hit at some point, the largest?
The largest was almost 30% in our jail and almost 40% in our dispatch. And I had to take people from patrol and assign them to the jail. I took people from patrol, assigned them to dispatch. So I was robbing Peter to pay Paul for the first year and a half of when I became sheriff.
Yeah, and for many of you, if you're not aware of this, our dispatch office has 25 slots for a 24/7 operation. That's when you call 911, they're there to answer the phone, to dispatch a fire truck, a police officer, sheriff's deputy. We were down to 9 people for a 24/7 operation just a few weeks ago. And fortunately, the Board of County Commissioners raised the pay rate for that department so that we're actually, I think, we're even pretty much with Spokane.
Yep,
And we started offering a hire bonus.
correct.
And within the first 2 weeks, we got 12 applicants, 4 or 5 were laterals, 1 from our own dispatch.
We, from an agency here in North Idaho. The initials, again, are the Idaho State Police.
Yeah,
Yes.
and one of the big reasons, one of the big reasons is because we weren't paying. That we were hiring and training, and then they would leave to Spokane for what, about a $10,000 raise just by transferring over?
And a shorter matrix, yep.
And a shorter matrix. So, and we had 9 years. It would take you 9 years to get to close to where they would get in 5 years, with the exception of the salary difference. They would never get to where Spokane was paying. And so that's kind of the high cost of being cheap. And we're trying to fix that. So, thank you.
Yeah, so the jail is a challenge, will always be a challenge, and it is a very, very expensive liability for all of you and all of us, so.
So they leave jail and they go to, excuse me, Brian.
Just want to jump in before we wake up Keith down here. Just wanted to put out there for juveniles, if they commit the crime before they turn 18, juvenile probation does have jurisdiction up until they're 21. So just wanted to interrupt. I know I'm not part of the
Okay.
adults, but just wanted to
No,
throw that
no.
portion out that we
Well,
do
thank
have
you.
adults. We do have some carryover where they're on both juvenile and adults. But juvenile, we can't have them in our caseload until they turn 21, and then they age out to the adult system.
And you actually have some that will age out and go over to Keith's office?
Yeah, because we
Asian?
actually had one that was just sentenced or dispoed a couple weeks ago, and he's 19 and a half, and
Yeah.
he'll be on until he's 21, so.
Okay.
And then
Well,
he'll migrate, so.
thank you. Keith, thank you for being so patient.
Oh, it's okay.
You actually have some very interesting stories, because the little bit that we've talked, about the probation side of this, and one of the things that kind of surprised me was that people move to this area on probation, and the county taxpayer has to pay the cost to monitor these people who just move here who are on probation.
Correct. It's the interstate compact. It's a compact throughout the whole 50 states, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. It's everybody signed up for it. It's a long process to do, but yes, we get people in constantly. You know, we got 4 in last week that were requested. The nice part about it is we've kind of changed up a little bit in the atmosphere of it. About 5 years ago, I kind of got fed up with it. And I said, well, are we going out and checking everything? Are we checking the boxes? Is there actually a house that the person's moving into? Are they just throwing addresses out? And you'd be surprised what we found. There was a lot of things where people says, no, that person's not allowed at my house. Or things like that. We just found different occasions where it was just not accepted. And then we sent it back to them, denying them. And you'd be surprised. We had one like 6 months ago. I didn't know this, but it was charged back in Maryland, attempted to kill somebody, attempted murder, misdemeanor. So I looked back and I was like, yeah, no. So we ended up going out and come to find out we had a long history of stalking of public officials, of females in the area, and we went and got letters from all those people. And we sent them back and said no. So what does Maryland do? They put them on unsupervised, and guess who showed up? So there's a guy in our community on unsupervised attempted murder. So those are some of the stories he's talking about.
Yep, very interesting. So talk about your caseload.
Well, currently we're sitting right around 1259, 1260. It just keeps climbing, and consistently it seems like 100 every year. Right now what we had is what we're seeing in the cases and stuff, and Stan and them, we've been working hard on it. During the COVID years, the criminals didn't stop. Well, we didn't have really a lot of courts going on because the Supreme Court shut us down. So most of those people were on felonies, getting charged and stuff. So they had to plead them down so they could get them on probation and get them watched because they're just out going around. So we had a large influx during COVID. And our officers were going into houses, and we took the 2 weeks to kind of regroup, but then we went back to the job and what we did and had to get back out there, same as Bob's group. They didn't have a choice of not going out. In the same way we didn't have a choice of going. But, you know, it was the bad flu, and we got over it. So that's the tough part, is just, you know, the caseloads coming up. We have 10 officers. We have some specialty courts, and I'll go over that in a second. But we have 10 officers, and then the average officer is carrying 110 to 120 cases. Officers aren't being efficient as they can because they're just going case to case to case to case. Ideally, you want them between 70 and 77. When we did that, we were just on top of things a lot quicker. And there's a delay that we can't. We have specialty courts. Domestic violence court, I have 2 officers just signed to that caseloads. And then I have DUI court, and then we just got it, which was good. We got it in place that we're starting work with, was Judge Eckhart and Stan's Tristan Porman, who's a deputy prosecutor, worked very hard on it. We're starting the Veterans Court. So I'm pretty proud of that. I wanted to do that from the beginning, from about 6 years ago when I got here. And we're starting to work to it and get the funding for it. And I'm pretty happy about it, so we can start taking care of our veterans in a little bit better way. And the mental health issues and stuff like that we keep coming across with the veterans and things like that. Jail's not going to fix it. So basically, what it comes back to is we're basically, the probation officers are the compliance officers for the judges. We don't create charges. We don't create anything. We're the compliance officers for the judges. So when we're out there, we're just not out there just creating charges to put people away. If they're not doing treatment, if they're not doing UAs. And this is where the county really gets stuck with it a lot. About 2010, it was mandated the county will provide misdemeanor probation. No funding for it. Here you go. You're stuck with it. So at that time, it was brought on. So again, we handle everything inside the county. Cities, county. We have 250 officers, 275 officers that we respond to. There's only 10 of them. So it makes it very troubling and very daunting in some occasions when you're getting those calls.
How do you recruit?
I recruit like a college football coach. I go out to somebody and say, I want you to come work for me. I hear good things. I don't want people that are badge heavy. I want people that have common sense and that want to talk to people. Because the biggest thing in probation is de-escalation. Because they're pretty upset. They've already pled guilty to a lot of things that they've done. It's trying to de-escalate things that are going on, which is a huge thing, and being able to talk to people. So I go out and I recruit. I find people that I hear good things about. I hear got good things in other people's departments. Sometimes people get burned out and get to the thing where they want to change. I changed my career from police to probation. So I was putting them in and then working on the treatment side. It's been great for my career because it gives me a different perspective. It extended my career. Because I was at that point where I had my mom die one day, the next day I'm putting somebody in a body bag. I was done. Doing this thing for a long time in this area. I love this area. I moved here in this area in '96, and it's changed a lot. I've been on the streets. I've worked the streets through the deputy when I was K-9, all that stuff. And I listen to the officers talk about it. So again, when I recruit people, it's usually I kind of do like a college football coach. I go out and say, hey, love to have you come on board. What do you think? But they still have to go through the competitive process. They have to still do polygraphs. They still have to do the psych. They still have to go through the process. But again, if somebody just makes that phone call that's possibly you're going to be your boss, makes that phone call to you, you feel a little bit more wanted going in. Instead of going, oh, I got to prove something. You don't have to prove anything to me. Just use your common sense.
And how long does it take to train a probation officer?
Well, they go through a 4-week academy down the probation of it, but it really is just the officers themselves. We have the training officers within our department, and then we reach out and we work with the prosecutors. We work with all the prosecutors, and we work with everybody. The training part of it takes, the understanding of where people are at because we deal with the substance abuse. 99.99% of the people that are on probation are doing UA test.
And
So
that
we're dealing with
is-
all substance abuse. So you really got to understand the different avenues because one that's on narcotics is totally different than the ones on alcohol. But some of the same concepts, but it's the way where you have to deal with it. And it's usually just time and experience.
So you're frequently testing them. You try to have contact with them at least once a month.
Well, it depends on the level of what we do. We do a level assessment when they come in. And the assessment is just to see where they're at. And it's not to grade them, it's just to give us a course of, because you ask, I think it's 29 questions, and trying to remember them all. So we grade all the questions, and if they have a little bit higher assessment, then we spend more time with them. There's some people come in and, they screwed up. So we work with those people as much as we can. And, I was telling Bruce, the other day, I said, I pulled our alcohol things that we have a little scram. It's called scram. It goes on their ankle. We measure alcohol in their system and stuff like that if they violate it and things. And if I can get somebody that's on alcohol past 10 months, they'll go, and in about 6 months they relapse, 7 months they relapse. If I get them past that 10 months mark, we have a huge success. So it's just getting them past that 10-month mark. The narcotics, a little bit different. That's what I'm saying. It depends on what you got to do.
Yeah. And what are your biggest challenges?
The biggest challenge is just the numbers and getting out and seeing them. And getting out, because just a home visit takes sometimes 2 hours, 3 hours to do it. And sometimes they're pretty quick. So it's time. I think everybody has precious, all of our times are precious. It's the time to get out and do it, and the numbers is our biggest challenge.
And this is a question for everyone up here, but what would you say is the number one driver in this community for why you're so busy?
Substance abuse for me. Absolutely.
I would agree. This is the same thing, for DUI-related crimes, of course, it's alcohol. For drug-related crimes, of course, it's drugs. But the majority of the domestic situations, one or both parties are intoxicated, whether it's alcohol or drugs. The majority of the thefts are to support a habit. And so, again, whether it's domestic, it's theft, it's drugs or alcohol, 8 to 9 out of every 10 cases are going to be substance abuse related.
So that's a big driver. And of course, growth too, because as the community grows, so too does the volume of these types of substance abuse-driven crimes. Would that be a fair statement?
100%.
I would agree.
Yeah. So,
Bruce, one thing I wanted to cover
Yes.
before we go, it's a bragging point for my officers. They're doing a fabulous job. The state average is about 36.9 on recidivism. You can just Google it and it'll tell you
36.9%?
39% of reoffending.
Okay.
I just got the numbers, and between male and female, we're averaging right about 15%. So our officers are doing an outstanding job. So it goes to all the officers and what they're doing. And the way that was measured, so everybody understands the way it was measured, these are the ones that come back into the system after they were already gone. It's not the ones that got another charge, another charge, another charge. And Stan will tell me, tell Stan too, is we have a lot of people on probation. You think it's 2 years. We have numerous people in for 4 and 6 years now because of the level of charges. We have a lot, so we're not seeing them drop off as fast. That's why our numbers keep increasing so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. And thank you all for coming up here. So I have results from the survey that you all participated in. So I thought I would share that a little bit with you. First question, what is your opinion of the Sheriff's Office enforcing laws and protecting citizens' rights? Unsure, 1. You got 1 who doesn't know. Dissatisfied, 1. You got 1 who's dissatisfied. 2 are neutral, and 43 are satisfied. So you are dismissed.
Well, thank you very much.
What is your opinion of the prosecutor's office prosecuting criminals? Now, I kind of expected this. 18 are unsure, 2 are dissatisfied, 10 are neutral, and 17 are satisfied.
You're staying after class.
But that's mostly because I don't think people understand the challenges of your office and what you have to do. And it's the same for what is your opinion of the sentencing of criminals in Kootenai County? 21 are unsure because people don't know. So hopefully tonight, people will not only realize that you're keeping track of the sentencing in your office, but they'll be paying attention to some of that sentencing for some of these people. 6 were dissatisfied with the sentencing, 13 were neutral, and 7 were satisfied. So it sounds like people were largely unsure or indifferent. What is your opinion of inmate housing in Kootenai County, jail and juveniles? 15 are unsure, 12 are dissatisfied, 12 are neutral, and 5 were satisfied. Again, I take this as just not really knowing what goes on in the local jail and our juvenile detention. Well, I wanted to know beforehand because you would have already known. The gentleman said we should have filled these out after this tonight. What is your opinion of probation services in Kootenai County? 25 unsure, 1 dissatisfied. I wonder if they're on probation. 13 are neutral, and 4 were satisfied. So again, I see that as people just not understanding, what your office does, what it deals with, and the success of your recidivism rate compared to the state or the industry average. Do you believe illegal immigrants should be welcomed in Kootenai County? We had 1 who said yes, and 44 who said no.
Whoever said yes,
how much of a concern is it if illegal immigration came here that it could overwhelm government services in Kootenai County? 43 said substantial, 5, and 2 said 4. So 1 being none, so 1 to 5.
Keywords, is it illegal?
Yes, illegal. Next question, do you believe Kootenai County should properly allocate resources to children 17 years and under in the justice system if it helps avoid a life of crime? 44 yes, 2 or no. I'd like to meet the 2 who said no. We'll have a discussion afterwards tonight. I really do believe it makes a big difference, and you heard the sheriff and the other folks up here talk about where if we put our money earlier into the process, we have a much greater likelihood of changing a young person's life and not paying for it for the rest of their life. Because we pay for that. We pay for the jail, we pay for everything. As you can see, 2/3 of our budget goes towards justice services. So the more we can get people out of that system, the less expensive it is, the lower your taxes can be, or the less your taxes go up. Next question. Do you believe Kootenai County government should support private entities that assist children 17 years and under in the justice system if it helps avoid a life of crime? 38 yes, 8 said no. I suspect a lot of people who said no just didn't realize programs like Children's Village, which really does help keep kids from getting into the system. Because that's what you want to do, is you want to avoid them getting into the system and hopefully get them help there. Do you believe that Kootenai County should have tougher sentencing on repeat offenders? That is, those with 2 or more convictions for the same type of crime. 44 said yes, and 1 said no. I'd like to meet that person too. Do you support mandatory minimums for repeat offenders, those with 2 or more convictions for the similar type crimes? 44 yes, 2 no, same number. Are you willing to pay more taxes to ensure employees who are involved with enforcing, prosecuting, sentencing, and housing criminals are properly paid? That is, pay people up to 97%, not more than 100% of surrounding jurisdictions. So they will be incented to stay with Kootenai County government and not leave for better paying jobs someplace else. I can tell you, and I know everyone up here can tell you, we have lost some fantastic people to other jurisdictions because we didn't pay a competitive rate. Would anyone disagree with that? No? 35 said yes, 7 said no. So I appreciate that support, hearing that from people, and that's part of the reason we're having town halls like this, so you can see what's going on. You heard it with the sheriff's office. We increased the pay with patrol. Now you're starting to stabilize and hopefully rebuild that department. Same thing with dispatch, down to 9 people. We fixed the pay, and now we're hoping to add 7 people by the end of the year. That's the intention. Do you believe growth should be slowed to help keep county services and our criminal justice system from being overwhelmed? 44 yes, 0 no. Growth drives it. Growth drives it. Do you believe our legislators should amend the existing impact fee statute so any new growth here will 100% positively pay for itself? 38 yes, 0 no. Now, let me tell you, there is an impact fee statute on the books, and it is a wonderful piece of window dressing, written by developers and to the benefit of the developers. And let me explain why. We cannot levy an impact fee for any item that has a shelf life of less than 10 years. It can only be levied for capital improvements, okay? So it must last 10 years or longer. Here's the catch. If we don't spend the money in 8 years, we have to give it back, okay? So if we need to expand the jail, which I estimated would run roughly $15 million in the future, and we can only collect a $551 impact fee for the jail, with a blend of 2/3 residential, 1/3 commercial, we're looking at, I believe, 18,000 homes that have to be built in 8 years, and 21 million square feet of commercial space would have to be built, which I think adds up to another 100+ Walmarts in the community to collect enough impact fee for $15 million within an 8-year period to expand the jail. So for all intents and purposes, we're never going to collect impact fees that are going to be meaningfully used. And I've been working with the cities. I mean, they've complained about the radios at the jail, which we proved last longer than 10 years. They said, no, we're not going to collect that. Then we said, what about parks and waterways? You know, because we have around 30 boat ramps in the county. No, we're not going to collect that because the cities already have their own parks impact fee, and they didn't want to double charge their residents. And so I said, well, we're not going to fight that battle today, so let's just stick with the jail bed fee. So $551, that's where we're at. we'll be having a public hearing for it sometime close in the near future to talk about that. But it only works if all the cities agree, because they would be the ones that collect that fee. Do you want the future of Kootenai County and its cities to have more or less population density? Now, we only had one person respond to that one. And they said they wanted more population density. So there you go, folks, get ready. And then what are your concerns and priorities? 1 is your first priority, 5 being your last. Number 1 priority is illegal immigration. Number 2, well, it was still illegal immigration out of everyone, but crime, and then growth and traffic and social issues are last here. So that gives you a little sense of the world as to at least what you, members of the community, think who came out here tonight.
Bruce, can I say something on February 15th? We're going to have a very popular town hall. We have filled every venue, and we're going to have the section chief for Border Patrol has committed to attend at American Legion on February the 15th at 6:30. Right, Lisa? 6:30. So we're going to have that section chief here. I encourage all of you to attend and ask him directly some of the questions and some of the frustrations that his office feels about enforcing illegal immigration. February the 15th.
All right, we have a couple questions. There was an article recently about kids attempting or threatening to pull out, forgive me for my the penmanship, walkers or
Canes or
canes
walking sticks.
from senior citizens at Walmart. This happened recently.
I have seen this trend on some videos. I have not seen it here in Kootenai County. If anybody has any direct information on that, but I've seen some of these videos, but I have not seen it occurring in Kootenai County.
And another question here, how do you legally slow growth? Well, the way you do that is with a comp plan, a comprehensive plan. That's where it starts. And last week, the Board of County Commissioners approved the funding for the Community Development Department to initiate surveys of the community to see what they want in this community. And I haven't met a person yet who said, you know, Bruce, Kootenai County's not growing fast enough. What can you do? Okay? They all want to see things slow down. And so it begins with a comp plan. And the survey data from the community is what's used to drive the comp plan. And so if the community wants to see less growth, that'll drive the comp plan, which drives the zoning and everything else. So that's one step. And there's really 3 different approaches to this. There's that approach, and then a second approach, which I'm working on with our staff here, and we're about to release it within the next 30 days, is a growth dashboard. And one of the things that elected leaders can do is they can say no to growth if they have a numerical reason. They can't say no to development just because they don't want it. They have to have a legitimate reason. And so that's what this dashboard is. It's similar to like the dashboard on your car. You have a speedometer, a tachometer, a yellow check engine light, a red check engine light, which means pull over. So we look at these different county services and we establish what is a service level from each of the elected officials, right? They set a service level. So as an example, the jail has been beyond the legal capacity every day for the last 2 years. That is an indicator that says we should be saying no to more growth, or at least pausing it for a little bit until we can get caught up with the infrastructure, or we can get caught up with the staffing, right? And so you have a number of these that you can look at on a web page, and you can see where the county services are compared to where they should be. And that is one of the reasons that you can use to slow growth down. And my hope is that the cities will see this, because the cities make their growth decisions and they don't take into account our jail population or how it's affecting the prosecutor's office or adult misdemeanor probation or juvenile detention or the court system. And so they can start to see these numbers and actually start maybe thinking about putting the brakes a little bit on the rate of growth that they have. And in a perfect world, not only will they look at our numbers, but they'll develop their own set of metrics too. And then they could tie that in with our comp plan. So we could actually have a community comp plan and not a jurisdictional comp plan. Because the county's comp plan is only for the unincorporated part of the county. And then the third approach to this, and it was on the ballot, and my hope is it will get on the ballot again, is an open space bond. Because I will tell you right now, it'll be cheaper in the long run for your taxes to buy open space and convert it to parkland, not manicured, really nice golf course type parks, but just open fields where people have trails and things like that, because the growth doesn't pay for itself here. The impact fees will never be collected to cover the infrastructure costs. So if you can keep open space, you have less density. It'll never get developed. And so those are the three ways that you can actually legally kind of slow the growth down, especially if these lands, these parklands, are bought between the county and the cities, because they can be buffers, because then the cities have to annex around those lands, and it's a little bit harder. And there's not much more land left on the prairie to develop. And so that's one of the other ways to slow the growth down. And so with that said, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out here. And I also want to tell all of you that we have some of the best people working in this county government. And they really legitimately care. They try hard to make sure they don't spend the money. Is there any place in here that you can think of where we have legitimate waste that could make a difference? Is there anyone? Speak now.
I believe we run a very, very lean, I can speak for the sheriff's office, we run a very, very lean office.
Yeah, I mean, just to put it in the perspective, between 2023 and 2024, the operating budget, there's three budgets in the county. There's a capital budget for long-term big expenses like buildings, computer software, things like that. There's the salary budget, and then there's the operating budget. That's the budget for buying the bullets, the food, the papers, all that stuff. Between 2023 and 2024, guess how much it went up out of a $110 million budget? $1 million bucks? Anyone? More than $1 million? Raise your hand. Okay. Okay. It went up $38,000. That's how tight we are staying on this budget. There is not much slop unless you want to go in and start counting paper clips. You know, the county runs a good operation. And so you should be very proud of that. And again, I thank you from me personally that you trust me to be a steward of this county government along with these folks here. So thank you. Thank you for coming out.